Hello everyone! This video that you're about to watch is my May wrap-up. It was pre-filmed and I talk about a ton of great books and some pretty shitty books, so I hope you enjoy that. But what I wanted to do was film a little bit of an intro to say that Black Lives Matter and it shouldn't be controversial and it shouldn't be difficult to say things like that because it's just true. All of the links that are usually in my description box have been changed to petitions you can sign, places you can donate to, resources for learning, and also there are links to videos and channels down below telling you literally how to be a better ally from Black booktubers. If you're watching white booktuber videos on how to be a better ally, you're not listening to the right people. So feel free to click on the links in the description box down below and actually do something instead of just talking about doing something. So while I am going to go back to posting content on my channel, you might see some changes to my content and you might see more recognition of when a book is actually problematic and racist. Instead of me just skipping over that issue, I'm going to start just calling it out. And if you have problems with the fact that I am talking about this and that going forward I'm going to be recognizing things like that more, and by things like that I mean racism and murder and shit that goes on every single day, then feel free to unsubscribe. I've only got 200 subscribers. I don't have a huge platform here on YouTube, and I don't have a huge platform here on Twitter either. But if you choose not to talk about shit in your videos, that's your choice. I will happily unsubscribe. I'm choosing to talk about shit in my videos. If you don't like it, unsubscribe. I don't know where the button is. But if you're here and you're watching it and you're here for me and you're here for me as a person, then you're invested in the kind of stuff that I'm invested in. We love books. We love talking about books. We love being educated and we love being informed. That's what I think of when I think of BookTube, and I really saw a different side of it in the past couple of weeks that made me kind of ashamed to be part of BookTube, and I hope that going forward that we can make positive impacts and positive changes instead of being complacent and shitty to each other. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the May wrap-up. So the first book I read in the month of May is actually a book that I've read before. It is Page by Tamora Pierce. It's the second book in the Protector of the Small Quartet. I've talked about this tons on my channel, so I'm not really going to go over this too much. This was a reread. It was a comfort read. At the time, this was like the first week of May, I still had no idea what was happening with my job. I still had no idea what was happening with my life, and I was super depressed, so I read a book for comfort. The second book I read was actually pretty fucking good. Beyond the Shadowed Earth by Joanna Ruth Meyer. What I loved about this book is that the main character is kind of a bitch. And also, you really don't want to root for her at all. She's a shithead, and she made a shitty deal, and she doesn't know how to treat people, and she's kind of a terrible person that gets what she deserves, really. Like, this is definitely not a happy-go-lucky, feel-good, this is a happy ending kind of book. This book really, really was the kind of book I needed to read when I was depressed, because it was just like, yeah, bitch, here's a depressed hoe. You're welcome. Read about her. She's not a good person. Because I have really been in my feelings lately about how I'm not a good person. And I was like struggling to read these books from perspectives of these righteous warrior girls that had a purpose in life and were doing good things in the world. Because I was like, bruh, what if you're just a shitty, depressed, sad bitch? What the fuck? Where are my books for that? This was it. I will say that the first like 150 pages of this book are boring as shit. And I wanted to burn it for like the first 150 pages. And then after that, it gets pretty good. The tempo picks up. You still don't root for the main character. Like, let me just set that out there. Not once did I actually root for the main character. She's like an anti-hero in a way. But I love the writing style. I actually really enjoy Joanna Ruth's books. This is the second one of hers I've read, I believe. The first one I read was Echo North, and that was beautiful. And so I had really high expectations for this. I did not know that this was the second book in a series However, you don't need to read the first book in the series to read this one. They're just kind of set in the same realm. So, I don't even know if there were any references to the first book or anything. Am I going to go back and read that first book in the series? Probably not. This is definitely not something that I'm going to reread. But it was nice. I'm glad I read it, and it was a book that I kind of needed at the time. The next book that I read in the month of May was Crave by Tracy Wolff. And I read this book in one day. And when I was in this book, I don't know why I got through it so quickly, because the main character went back and forth from being extremely relatable as like a girl that, has gone through some shit, has gone through some tragedy. She gets moved in with some family members so that she can still have some sense of home, and she was feeling like really deep pain and articulating it fairly well. And then, of course, she goes to this magic creature school where fairies, vampires, and dragons and werewolves all exist. But they can take human form, right? So that was all so great to me. And it's a boarding school, so like you can really be in there. But then the main character meets Vampire Boy and becomes stupid. Becomes incredibly stupid for the sake of a boy. And I know I've done that in my life. I have done that more than one time in my life. So it wasn't sitting very well with me. And then when I got through the whole book super quick. I don't know why. The pacing was pretty decent. In terms of character development, there's a lot of characters, but the ones that you read about the most kind of hook you in. But this whole time there was something about this book that was just driving me nuts. One, it is absolutely a Twilight wannabe book. Two, I realized after I had finished reading it, this book is racist. The main character is a white girl that moves to Alaska, and she lives with her white family that runs a boarding school in Alaska. She gets special privileges because she's white in this white boarding school in Alaska. The vampires in this book are white, so they're the good guys. The dragons in this book are described as black, with afros, specifically. That's the language that's used. And they're the bad guys. So fuck this book. Don't fucking read this book. Don't support this fucking author. The only reason I still have this is because the bookstore that I want to unhaul it to isn't open. Fuck this book. It's racist. Don't read it. I gave this 1 star on Goodreads because I did read the entire book. It was only after the fact, after I reflected on it, that I realized why I was uncomfortable. I was literally reading about racism in Alaska. Are you kidding me? There was no acknowledgement of the indigenous people of Alaska other than a brief reference to art. Yeah, this book is going... honestly, I kind of want to burn it. I kind of want to burn this book. Yeah, Tracy Wolff, by the way. Crave. Don't buy it. Don't read it. It's racist. The next book that I read after I read Crave was Squire. This is the 3rd book in the Protector of the Small Quartet by Tamora Pierce. I went through this in like a day and a half. I love these books. And again, I'm not really going to talk about it too much because I've talked about it multiple times on my channel. After I read Squire, I started reading The Shadow Glass by Rin Chupeco, and I realized that the next day, Ballot of Songbirds and Snakes was coming out. So I pretty much dropped that completely, and then I stayed up until like 10:30 trying to wait up until midnight till the book dropped. That did not work. So The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out... I don't even remember. Oh, on the 19th. What? Did it come out on the 19th? I don't remember, honestly. This month has blurred for me, but the day it came out, I bought a digital copy because there was no fucking way that I was going to get a physical copy because I don't leave my apartment right now for anything, and Amazon wasn't going to get it to me fast enough. So I bought a digital copy on my tablet, and I read it I read the first 400-ish pages of the digital copy the first day, and then I finished it the next morning. So, I have some thoughts about this book. So I rated this book 3 stars because I'm glad I read it. I had just reread all of the Hunger Games books and watched the movies, so the topic was super fresh in my head. And I'm glad I read it because it was nice to read the perspective of President Snow, believing that even though he was being oppressive and being a terrible person, in his own mind, he was doing it for the right reasons. And it was, like, honestly kind of like a fucked up thing to read because it really started to confront me. And so I was like, oh shit, I'm like that. Fuck. Wow. So it was scary to read because it was like holding up a mirror and realizing like, oh my God, I'm so fucking complacent about so many things that I don't have to be complacent about because I can talk about them. And also realizing that, like, there's plenty of shit that I do in my day-to-day that hurts people. And it was interesting from that point of view. The first, like, 2 parts, so interesting to read. How the Hunger Games started to become an event rather than just a punishment. Like, literally putting children up as, like, entertainment. All of the formation of that was really, really interesting, and I sped through it. The second the first version of, like, these Hunger Games is over, that next chunk of the book is boring as shit. So fucking boring. Boring, gray, drab. I had to force myself to read to get through it, because I was like, there's got to be something at the end. Literally from after the time that the Hunger Games ends all the way through to, like, the epilogue, that whole chunk of the book, I could do without. I don't care. I don't want it. I don't want to read it. And the reason I say that is because there was so much that was, like, trying to get me to, like, care about Snow. I don't. There was so much like, oh, look at this little Easter egg that I'm placing right here. Do you remember that from these previous books? Do you remember? Ooh, look at that. Ooh, I'm glad you found that. But they weren't really hidden. They were really fucking obvious. So just, it felt too long, honestly. Much like this fucking video. So I rated it 3 stars. I'm never going to read it again, but it was interesting to read another part of the formation of Panem and the Hunger Games. So then, that brings me to the last book that I read in the month of May, which was The Shadowglass by Rin Chupeco. And let me tell you, the first 150 pages of this, I was not in it. Chapter 8 came around, and my life exploded and crashed around me. And this book made me cry, and a lot of books don't make me cry. And part of the reason it made me cry is because the trans rep in this is really good. And at my job, I employ a lot of trans kids because they feel like it's a place where they can be themselves because I curate that space for them. And I make sure that they are always loved and respected. And if they ever feel like they are not being loved and respected, then they can take a break and I'll escort whoever is causing the issue out of the store. So, to see trans rep, and to see it done respectfully and beautifully, and in a way where I feel like my kids would see it and think, I wish that was me, it was really good to read, honestly. Not to mention, the rest of the story kind of kicks the fuck off. There's betrayal in this, there is, like, treason, and there's healing, which is really nice to read. There's a lot of healing. Ooh, I'm getting teary. Whew, whew. The first book in this series is boring as shit. It really is. It is so boring. And it took me, like, 2 weeks to get through the first book in this series, but it just really establishes the world, and it sets up the expectations and how the characters are going to be treated. And the second book is so filled with like a lot of violence and a lot of hate and a lot of unsolved questions and a lot of like really horrible feelings. You can just feel them in that book. And this one kind of fixes everything and puts it all back together, and it just shows a lot of growth in the characters. So this book really, like, I cried like this at the end of this book, y'all. Ooh, it fucked me up so hard. That book is like really good. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching if you made it all the way through this video. I barely made it all the way through this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye!